Three, two, one.
Action. Said that more dramatically than usual.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. We are here for episode seven, pretty good, of our
Yeah,
podcast Untitled ZX, also known as Movie Talk with Nick and Uncle Frank. I'm Uncle Frank. This is Nick.
that's me.
Nick, how was your weekend?
Uh, Tiresome, uneventful, uninteresting. The usual around here.
Did you get any snow?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I'm hoping winter's almost over, really. So,
I'm hoping so as well, although I did check my weather app. It sounds like there's a chance of snow overnight tonight, which is not particularly something I'm looking forward to.
yeah, I hear you. We didn't do much this weekend. We looked for cars for, yeah,
Fun.
fun times. All right,
Yeah.
this week we're gonna talk about movie scores, music. I know you're into the music, so
I took a
I'm curious
class
to see
about
what
it.
your list is, and we're gonna do two reviews, No Time to Die and The Rip. And then for Star Wars time, we're gonna talk about upcoming Star Wars video games and how they expand the galaxy.
It's the only time I
Uh,
ever really play story-based games is when they've got
yeah.
the Star Wars brand on them.
Did you see any movies this weekend?
Yeah, last minute I decided to go see, it's called How to Make a Killing. It's a crime comedy drama. It's like a dark comedy more than anything with Glenn Powell. Very amusing film.
Yeah,
I do wish it hammered down a little more about sort of the dangers of like the rich and capitalism, because the whole premise is that he finds out he's part of a rich family and he decides to get the inheritance. He decides he's going to kill all of the relatives in line in that order of succession.
that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Well, Glenn Powell, yeah, he does a good job. He can be pretty funny sometimes,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think he did a solid job. His
I'm
first
supposed to
kill.
watch. Someone told me to watch his new show that's on Hulu, where he's a football player.
Oh yeah, I think it's called Chad Powers, I believe. I've seen a
Yeah,
lot.
someone said it was funny, so I got to check that out. But
I heard a lot about that.
yeah,
Uh,
it's on my list, but I don't have a lot of time to get to my list. So
neither
he's
do I.
anti-capitalist, huh? I don't know. Our whole society is built on it.
Well, I feel like the movie is anti-capitalist. The character, absolutely not, but
Gotcha. All
it's
right.
it's like, yeah, no, this is not a thing that a normal person could get away with. Not a normal person could not kill seven rich moguls and get away completely unscathed.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
But if you're
All right.
rich
Let's
enough,
talk
that's all you
about the
can
top. Let's talk about the top five best scores. Before we get into the list, though, in your mind, what makes up a good score, and how I don't know, how does it really contribute to a movie?
Um, Memorability, like if you've got iconic tracks and themes that stick with people, that's always a good thing. Knowing when to use music and when not to, because I think one thing the best composers do that a lot of other composers don't is they know when not to use music just as
Mm,
much as when they know to use music. I've seen
yeah.
plenty of movies where the score was so overbearing and it was like, okay, we need to tone this down a little bit. And then I've seen some absolutely masterful scores. Uh,
Yeah.
and I have my picks here are wildly unorthodox, I feel like.
Mhm.
But
Well, it is nice when you can remember a theme, but yeah, let's start with number five. What do you got?
we got again, we're going unorthodox with Daft Punk's score for Tron Legacy.
And what made it good?
So it's interesting when you see a like regular, like conventional musician try to do a film score, someone like Daft Punk, who is well known for not film scores. And you sort of see something like this with Nine Inch Nails' score for its sequel, Tron Ares, last year. They sort of failed where Daft Punk succeeded. And I did like the score for that movie, but that movie felt more like a music video than a complete competent film.
Hmm.
The way you sort of get that sort of like Daft Punk has a very specific like DJ-ish, electro-ish style, but there's a lot of individual tracks where you can tell they know when to tone it down, when not to be as overbearing. So they do what they do best because the tone of their traditional style of music works well with sort of the aesthetic of this world, this digital world.
Hmm.
but they know when to tone it back. They know when not to just go overbearing with their sort of techno
Right.
vibes.
Okay. I
Again,
would say
something
that
that Nine
that
Inch
probably
Nails.
is not that probably is not one I would have expected. What is
No.
number four?
Um, I really the entirety of this franchise can be a contender for this, but I'm going to go with Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings by Howard Shore. Brilliant composer. The themes in the films they stick throughout the trilogy. You've got the typical like the title theme that's used in all six of the Middle Earth films. Well, seven, I guess, because they did reuse the theme in the War of the Rohirrim film in 2024, even though that wasn't Shore composing. They did utilize a lot of his motifs, and you know it's iconic because that title theme, it's not like Star Wars where it's like a blaring, like minute and a half long main theme that everyone recognizes. It's just a couple of notes that plays when the logo pops up for each film, and it's just as iconic.
Hmm.
And again, it sort of knows when you need like this epic, blaring, like insane, like heroic music where you've got like the Fellowship theme or when you've got like the Nazgul theme, but it also knows when it needs those quieter moments where you have a much more subtle score, or perhaps even not a score at all. And it manages to mix both the brutality of this mission, but it also knows to use more elegant styled tracks when it needs to, like
Hmm.
when they're at Rivendell. And it blends all these different styles of just classic fantasy music in a way for a film or a trilogy really of that scale, because I guess I could really count the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy here since Score and Shore obviously did all three of them.
Right. Has he done any other movies?
I'm not overly familiar with a lot of his work outside of this franchise. I
Yeah.
know he's definitely done more films.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think his most recent score was for, I believe, David Cronenberg's most recent film called, I think it was The Shrouds a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
But I'm not overly familiar with
He's
most of
most
his.
known for this one, I guess.
Absolutely, it's iconic. It's
Yeah.
everyone knows Lord of the Rings.
All right. Number three.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse by Daniel Pemberton did the score for this film, as well as its sequel, Across the Spider-Verse, in 2023. And this, just the film's animation was already revolutionary enough. It was very unique and stylized, and it felt very comic booky. But
Hmm.
Pemberton's score complements sort of that aesthetic so well. The music feels very comic booky, and every single track or theme, like again, it's more technological and more it's hard to really describe why it works so well, but he knows how to capture the personality of each individual character with each individual character's themes, like every single theme for every single character. And frankly, I really do think I probably should have put its sequel Across the Spider-Verse, which had more themes for individual characters, even characters that are only on screen for 5 to 10 minutes in a 2.5 hour film.
Hmm.
He manages through one simple like minute and a half long track, he can effortlessly capture the personality of a character. And since they were hopping between these different universes with these very different visual styles, you can sort of feel through the music the vibes and the aesthetics of each world that
Hmm.
each character comes from. And it complements sort of this because the animation also does the whole we have different aesthetics for each world, each universe. We use different styles of art, different styles of visuals and movement and color. And
Hmm.
every single track, every single theme complements it so well, complements each individual world.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay. All right. Number two and number one. These two are famous, I would say. So who do you have as
Absolutely.
number two?
We've got Hans Zimmer. There's a million you could have picked for him, but characteristically, I went with Dune, as I so frequently do with him. There's like
Yeah.
five other scores I could have used for Zimmer that I could have said Interstellar. I could have said Lion King. I could have said No Time to Die, which we're going to talk about later here anyway.
Yeah. He has done a ton of stuff. I mean,
He
it's
has.
crazy, right?
He's won several Oscars. I believe this being one of the films he won an Oscar for, Dune.
Hmm.
It's such just an insane score. He manages to, again, the importance of iconic themes. There's like three or four notes in like this one motif that pops up throughout both films. That's even though it's only been around a couple years, it's become iconic in pop culture already.
Yeah. Hmm.
But this world is very much a it's inspired a lot by real life politics and religions, but despite being this sci-fi piece set 20,000 years in the future, and he
Mhm.
sort of captures these aesthetics so extraordinarily well.
Hmm.
You sort of have inspiration from like a lot of the Fremen faction, the tribal people from Arrakis. They have a very I believe they're very Arabic inspired in terms of their aesthetics and sort of the way their religions are presented throughout the books.
Right.
And when translated to film, you feel that sort of inspiration in Zimmer's score. And
Hmm.
there are these like you've got I'm really gonna end up putting both Dunes here because they're basically one long film,
Right, right, right,
single
right.
film split into two parts.
Yeah.
And the motifs throughout, you have these moments that are more somber, more sort of just admiring the beauty of this world.
Yeah.
And then you have these tracks like the track's called Premonition from part one, and that motif is repeated throughout a couple times in part two, sort of showcasing the horror of this religious fanaticism and just the horrors it leads to. And the final track in part two is sort of a reprise of the love theme, even
Hmm.
though the tone of this moment does not line up with that at all. And yet it works so extraordinarily well.
Hmm.
The way you sort of have this love theme in a in an ever so slightly more somber note, because this is a very like somber, dark ending for
Yeah.
part two as our
All
hero
right.
falls down the dark path fully.
Tell me about your number one choice.
Um, this is another composer that we could have talked about a million different things for. I'm not even going to sugarcoat. It's John Williams, the greatest
Yeah.
to ever do it. The man's 94 and still kicking. Like he's going to score Spielberg's next movie, Disclosure Day, which comes out
Wow.
in a couple months.
That's crazy. At
He's
94.
He's 94. Technically, he said he's retired, but he's pretty much come out and said, like, yeah,
He'll
no,
just
Spielberg, my boy
he'll just
Steve's
do it for
making a movie.
Spielberg, I guess, huh?
Exactly. He's like, if they've been friends for 50 years, he's like,
Yeah.
I, he pulls up every time he's like, I'm retired, but if my boy's making a movie, I got one more in me.
Well,
Um,
why this one? Did he do he did obviously all the Star Wars, right? Like
the main
but
nine installments. He also did main themes for the Han Solo movie and the Obi-Wan show, but that was just the themes.
yeah.
I actually went with The Last Jedi here, which
Right.
is definitely going to be a controversial. I know the film itself is extremely controversial, and I understand why, even if I don't agree with it to many extents. But this score in particular, I think might be Williams' finest work. And there's like four other Star Wars movies I could say are worthy of that title. Empire Strikes Back, New Hope, and Revenge of the Sith, I think, are all on the same level.
Hmm.
But this film is the one that really challenges sort of the mythos of this universe. It feels very mythological, but also the most thematically potent. And Williams sort of blends a mix of familiar themes as well as brand new themes. So we've got several new motifs that reoccur throughout the film. There's one motif that plays during the opening space battle that plays again during the big climactic battle in the third act on Crete. And there's one track in particular which sort of highlights why I love this particular score so much. The track's like 6 minutes long. It's called The Battle of Crete, which is from the third act during the Battle of Crete. And
Yeah.
that track is like this epic moment where it like opens with this somber rendition of the Force theme before going into like the Resistance March from The Force Awakens. And throughout the track, you get that motif I mentioned from the beginning of the film. You get Rose's theme, which is a more like uplifting but kind of somber, depending on the moment.
Hmm.
Throughout the track, you hear the Resistance March again. Um, Kylo Ren's theme pops up a couple times, and at the end, which is during one of the more triumphant moments during the battle when the Millennium Falcon appears and starts taking down TIE fighters, you actually get a rendition of the TIE fighter attack theme from A New Hope, which has been used also in Return of the Jedi and Solo. And just the
So he
way
weaved them
you,
all together, really.
yeah, you blend the way he like masterfully weaves sort of the what we're familiar with and what's brand new to this film together in sort of like this just magnificent like web of everything we know and everything we've yet to see all
I
together.
guess it kind of makes sense. Sort of a last way to leave the Star Wars universe is with that
Yeah, this
score.
was not the final film. I feel like the one afterwards, Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, which was not a very good movie, and that particular score felt like he was just not even trying. It's
Yeah,
like he brought his A game for The Last Jedi and just never
yeah,
brought it again because he
yeah.
didn't feel like it, which, again, Rise of Skywalker didn't deserve his A game anyway, but
All right, good list. So John Williams tops it off.
as he should, the greatest.
Let's talk about some movie reviews. We're gonna start with the Rip. So I started it, but I didn't get through it yet. So as is usually the case, but
Yeah, that sounds about right.
yeah. So what's the movie about?
So this is a pretty like run-of-the-mill Netflix thriller. It's not overly mind-blowing. It's mostly it's about these like elite cops. I don't remember what division they are because most cop thrillers on Netflix are the same, but this is the same freaking thing as Havoc from last year. But this it's about cops rooting out corruption in the police force during a drug rip where they find like 3 million bucks or 20 million bucks or however many dollars it was worth of drugs.
Yeah,
As you can tell, this was not an overly memorable film, but
yeah. From what I saw so far, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are good in it. So
well, they're good in every. Actually, that's a lie. Ben Affleck played Batman, and we don't talk about that time he played Batman.
all right, but in this kind of movie, it's kind of like I feel like they're good at. Yeah,
I
you know.
feel like he like leeches off of Matt Damon a lot. A lot of his success is usually dependent on Matt Damon being involved.
Yeah. The only thing I found is in Miami, and I'm like, I don't know. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck feel like they should be in the Northeast somehow, but feels weird for them to be in Miami. But
I completely forgot it was Miami. It didn't even really feel like it was in the like Florida
nah,
like
it didn't
tropic.
really feel like Miami.
It felt like
So,
Miami like once during like the one scene in the movie that was actually during the daytime.
right. Yeah, the rest of it didn't really.
And
So,
the ending where they were sitting on the beach for some reason, but
yeah.
it's like the only time you're like, oh yeah, this is Florida.
So, what's your score for this movie?
Solid 7 out of 10. It's sufficient at being like the simple, basic sort of run-of-the-mill at Netflix thriller entertainment, but it's a Netflix thriller. I've seen movies like this before. There was one called Havoc with Tom Hardy and Timothy Olyphant last year, which
Yeah.
did a very similar thing with like cop corruption being rooted out and
Hmm.
held the third act of the movie aesthetically, the way it was shot, felt very similar, but I feel like
Yeah.
that movie was a million times more interesting because
Mm.
it actually had pretty good action sequences. That movie, Havoc, doubled down more on the action, so
Yeah.
it really feels like the poor man's Havoc. Um,
Now, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, their company produced it, I think, right? Like
um,
they're producers now.
yeah, that
They're
makes
probably
sense.
making boatloads of money, I'd imagine, just making these little movies for Netflix. So
Yeah, I mean Affleck directs a lot too these days, so
yeah, he has been, yeah.
yeah, I did like some of the supporting
So
actors.
they get paid twice.
Yeah, I liked a lot of the supporting actors in this. I really liked Stephen Yoon's character. He was one of the other cops. I'm familiar with him because he voices the main character in Amazon's animated adaptation of the Invincible comics. Great show, new season in a couple weeks.
Hmm.
He's the lead character in that, great in that show, but I always find it fun when he popped up in something else.
Yeah.
Kyle Chandler was one of the other cops. He was like the corrupt cop who's like the main villain, but he's like a twist villain. They don't reveal it till later.
Hmm.
I don't remember his character's name, but I liked his performance. He was fun. He's
Yeah.
actually going to play Hal Jordan in the new Green Lantern show this summer.
What would be better to you, The Rip or How to Make a Killing?
Probably How to Make a Killing. That's a way more stylish film that has more going for it.
Yeah.
And I also really like movies that make fun of capitalism. That's fun
Okay.
because
Gotcha.
the system sucks, and I love seeing movies that make fun of the fact that the system sucks.
Some parts do, for sure. All right, let's talk about No Time to Die.
Now,
Um,
this is a good one.
yeah, this was I saw it's got Rami Malek in it. He is great.
Yeah, he was actually pretty underutilized, even though he played the main villain. He was great when he was on screen, but he was only in it for maybe 15, 20 minutes in a nearly 3 hour long film.
That seems to be, I don't know, in all the James Bond movies we've talked about the villain's not in it enough, you know?
I I think the only one that really like utilize of the Craig era, at least the only one that I feel like the villain had a good amount of screen time was Javier Bardem's Silva back in Skyfall, which I do still think that's the most compelling of the Bond villains I've seen thus far.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's called James Bond, so they want to focus on James Bond, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I don't know. You need a good villain, you know?
yeah, and in the Daniel Craig era, they really get into Bond as a human being. They don't
Right.
This is not just super spy James Bond. Like we get personal. We give him emotional stakes, which I can't really speak about the older films as I'm getting into them, but I have read and heard a lot that that's not really a thing that they did too often, pretty much with everyone from Connery to Brosnan, where they're just James Bond doing spy things, doing spy adventures. There's no real like long-term emotional stakes or like overarching narrative throughout the films.
Right.
Whereas the Craig films, everyone is directly connected. It's more sequential rather than one-off. So like the ending of Casino Royale leads right into the beginning of Quantum of Solace, and then like Skyfall and not
Yeah, it does seem
Skyfall.
like, well, yeah, the first one he was just becoming a double O, and this one he ends pretty poorly, I'll say.
Yeah.
So pretty much the whole sequence, I guess.
Yeah, this is like the end of his journey, and this follows up on a lot of things from Spectre, although I do think it handles things like Blofeld a lot better. I
Hmm.
feel like Blofeld actually works better when there's less of him because he returns in this film, but he's only physically appears in one scene.
Hmm.
And this is a 5-year-old film, but spoiler alert, he dies. He dies in the one scene he appears in because he's
Oh, now people are going to be mad. Wait for the comments to come, Nick.
oh no, they're not gonna like it when I bring up something a little bigger that happens in the film
Yeah. Well,
because
that's why we're going to end up with a new James Bond, I guess. So
yeah, because he kind of died too.
he kind of bites it.
I
Yep.
don't really think this film is like as big of a deal talking about that spoiler because this film is sort of famous for being the one where Bond dies
Yeah.
because it's like the first and only time they've ever killed off a James Bond.
I don't know if this is the right way for James Bond to die, like on a giant bomb on an island in the middle of nowhere. I don't know.
I
He
mean,
does sacrifice himself, though, I guess.
yeah,
So,
I like sort of the character ramifications and sort of this is his past as a killer coming back to bite him.
yeah.
And you
But
sort of see that with Rami Malek's character.
but you do want a character to win, and he doesn't really get to win in the end, I
I mean,
suppose.
he
But
does win. He accomplishes his goal. He defeats Safin. He stops the world from ending,
I
and he
guess.
gives his daughter a chance to live a normal, peaceful life.
But he doesn't get to go right off into the sunset.
No, he definitely doesn't get his
I
right
did
off.
think in the last scene where she's starting to tell her daughter about James Bond, I'm like, it'd be interesting to do a movie off the daughter, wouldn't it?
Maybe, although I'm really excited for what they do next because for the next film, the reboot, they've actually got Denis Villeneuve, who directed the Dune films, Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, Sicario, all that.
Hmm.
He's directing it. And
But we don't know who James Bond is yet, right?
not yet, no. There's been a lot of rumors. There's been a million different actors rumored, but as far as I'm aware, this is just a normal thing in the age of the internet when a new James Bond is happening. It's like everyone and their mother may or may not be playing James Bond.
I did see a note about would they have it be a woman and be the daughter, and I think they confirmed it wouldn't be, but
Yeah, I think someone asked Daniel Craig about it, and Daniel Craig very famously hates playing James Bond. So
yeah,
someone said they're like, should a woman play James Bond? And Craig said, no, she does. Any woman deserves better than that.
that's funny. All right, so what grade would you give this movie?
Solid 9 out of 10. I think the emotional stakes sort of made up for some of the weaker aspects with the villain, even though he was very good when he was on screen.
Yeah,
He was both compelling and sort of terrifying because of how sort of monotone he can portray himself and
yeah,
presented himself and how he saw himself as this sort of morally just hero and he saw himself as he and Bond as being the same.
hmm,
And obviously we the audience can tell that like they are very different. Bond kills people only when they're bad and he has to, and Safin is over here like, yes, I'm going to kill 1 billion people with a bioweapon.
yeah.
There's actually a James Bond video game coming out in May that I might get, which is sort of inspired by stuff like I think Casino Royale is a heavy inspiration for that game because that's about Bond before he even becomes a double O.
Hmm.
So that'll
Well, speaking of games,
yeah, it's a great segue.
moving over to Star Wars time, we wanted to talk about some of the video games that are coming out in the universe and how they expand the universe. So, where should we start?
I'm going to start with the two we know have set release dates and that we know are actually going to come out because that is the fun with Star Wars video games is half the time they'll get announced with like a cinematic trailer and then they'll just never be addressed again, which
Mm,
we're going to talk about with a couple of the ones I'm going to mention later.
okay.
Um, so we're going to start with, I guess I'm going to go a little out of order from the list. I'm going to start with Galactic Racer, which
Hmm.
it was announced at the Game Awards 2025, which was in December. Was a cinematic trailer, and they released the first look at actual gameplay footage.
Yeah.
Um, I believe it was like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, they revealed the gameplay trailer. No set date yet, but from experience, I'm going to buy it anyway because this is what I do when it comes to Star Wars games. It can be a game where I'm like, I don't think this is going to be all that interesting, and I'll still spend $110 on it.
But they usually do. They sometimes reveal something about a storyline.
A lot of them will be story driven when it comes to these games, although I would love a new Battlefront with like a multiplayer Star Wars game because Battlefront
Mhm.
2 was at the height of its popularity in 2019, early 2020, and EA being EA said, "So, you see how this game's giving us a lot of money? Stop updating it and go make a sequel to the game that made us no money."
Who
And
makes who's making Galactic Racer?
I don't know the developer, but I believe the studio is run by former Need for Speed developers, which was a very popular racing franchise back in the 2000s and 2010s. So from what we've seen, it looks very like fun from a gameplay perspective because it sort of incorporates the destruction that you sort of get with like pod racing in this as because we saw a little bit of pod racing in episode 1 and that was a very deadly sport. We saw people straight up
Yeah.
crash and explode and die on numerous occasions.
The only thing about a racing game is like usually have a lot of different tracks or in order to have multiple ways to play it, you
Yeah.
need different tracks, different, I guess, different cars or different
Yeah, they can.
pods.
It looks like they're not doing what, because this is not far from the first Star Wars racing game. When episode 1 came out and pod racing was a thing, they were capitalizing that like there was no tomorrow. They kept making
Yeah.
racing game after racing game, but it was all themed around pod racing specifically, which obviously that will be incorporated in this. But there's a wider variety of vehicle types. You have speeders and other types of
Yeah.
land or hover vehicles
Yep.
because more recent
Yeah.
media has revealed different forms of racing. I think there was one called swoop racing where they drove swoop bikes,
Mm.
and this
Okay.
sort of seems to be an amalgamation. But this does have a story mode as well.
Mm.
Timeline wise, it takes place sometime after Return of the Jedi, and it focuses on this like up and coming racer who has and he has to deal with racing legends, many of whom are new characters, although they do bring back Anakin Skywalker's rival Sebulba from Episode 1,
Huh. Okay.
much older and much wiser now, so he's not racing anymore. He's more of a mentor figure. But
Okay.
That's a deep cut they brought in. They also brought back, and this one had the fans going wild. They're bringing back Ben Quaterneros, who was a background character in episode one, who has become sort of infamous for his just ridiculously goofy design, and he has been memed to oblivion. So him actually returning in this game has people losing their minds, and it's the greatest thing.
Okay. Now tell me about your second choice.
We're gonna another the other one confirmed for this year, which we are getting two games this year. The other one is called Zero Company. It
Okay.
is set at the height of the Clone War, so in between episodes two and three, and focuses on this like special ops group that has a bunch of mercenaries and people involved in sort of it's almost like a Republic Black Ops, and we've got these various characters. We've got a Jedi, a clone trooper, a
Mhm.
smuggler, a Mandalorian, even an Umbaran bounty hunter. And an Umbaran is particularly interesting because Umbara was a separatist controlled world during the war and was a site of one of the most brutal battles in the war to take control of the planet. So it's interesting seeing an Umbaran fighting with the Republic. And it's
Yeah.
sort of a
So
strategy
the
type game. It's
yeah.
it's being developed by two studios. One of them, I don't remember the name of the studio, but they've done strategy type games, but they're working in conjunction with Respawn, which is a subsidiary of EA, and they are known for games like Titanfall, Apex Legends, and they have experience in Star Wars with 2019's Jedi Fallen Order and its 2023 sequel, Jedi Survivor.
Hmm.
And that gives me some semblance of confidence. I'm kind of tired of seeing the Clone Wars time period explored in this universe. We've seen so much of it, but this gives me a little more optimism just because this is an entirely new cast of characters. Like we don't know who any of these characters are. They're brand new. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. I don't think this is going to be like huge in like the story or like the lore,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
should be sort of fun, I guess.
So tell me about some of the others don't have dates yet, right?
I'm going to start with the Untitled sequel to Jedi Survivor, and that one I've been speculating for a while that that'll probably end up being released. My guess has been early to mid 2027. I
Okay.
wouldn't be surprised if they go for an April or spring release like they did with Survivor back in 2023, which
Hmm.
will give it enough time to be close to the next film release. But
Right.
that that has me very excited because I absolutely love the first two games, and this is the final installment of the trilogy that I mentioned, Fallen Order Survivor. I have absolutely no idea where this story is going to go, and that has me beyond excited. I had my predictions going into the second game a while ago, and then all of my predictions ended up being as far from as to the reality as possible, and I could not have been happier.
When does this story take place? Who's Cal?
Cal Kestis, he is a Jedi Padawan who survived the Purge, and he this story takes place, well, we don't know when this exact game takes place, somewhere in between episodes three and four, but that's a very large gap
Yeah.
because the first game took place 5 years after
Hmm.
episode three, and then the second game took place 5 years after the first game, putting it about
Hmm.
9 years before episode four.
Yep.
I have no idea how big the time jump will be this time, but I'm
Okay.
assuming we're going to stay in that 19-year period
Right.
between episodes three and four.
Okay.
And Cal is this compelling character because in the first game we sort of follow his like survivor's guilt because we see he holds himself accountable for failing to save his master.
Hmm.
When the clones turned on them and started killing the Jedi, he holds himself accountable, and this is him sort of finding a dealing with that guilt after he finds this Jedi master who had failed her apprentice. Her
Yep.
apprentice, she had been captured and tortured by the Empire, and she eventually sold her apprentice out, and her apprentice was tortured, broken, and turned to the dark side and became one of the Empire's Jedi hunting inquisitors who said apprentice is actually the game's main villain, who is just as compelling of a character. She's an exceptional antagonist. I talked about her a little bit in when I was talking about the villains a couple episodes back.
Hmm.
Um, Absolutely exceptional story building. And then the second game, sort of follows. They've tried these people, these broken people who have found this family. They've split apart and have tried to make their way in the galaxy in this imperial dominated world. Cal is fighting with Saw Gerrera's partisans trying to fight the Empire, but he sort of has to learn. This is sort of him learning that you can't just beat the Empire by actually fighting them, but by protecting their enemies. And
Okay.
sort of find him work with his old the Jedi Master who became his second mentor, really.
Yeah, yeah,
And you see him dealing with these themes of like loss as well, and you see
yeah.
him sort of struggle with the dark side,
So I'll
and
be curious to see what the third one's about then.
very much so. I'm absolutely ecstatic. I've beaten both of the first two games 3 times each.
Wow. All right. Tell me about your other choices.
So there's Eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
Eclipse is a bizarre one. It's developed by Quantic Dream, which is the studio that has not done a game in ages. They're a French studio, but they won a lot of awards for their game Detroit Become Human in 2017, which was their most recent game 9 years ago. But this
Oh.
game, we don't know much about it from a gameplay perspective. We have literally no idea what it's going to look like. But we know they were dropped a cinematic trailer at the Game Awards 2021, so over
5 years ago
4 years
now.
ago.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 years ago.
They still haven't
Um,
come out with a game yet.
yeah, no, that was the first and last time we heard about the game. We've heard it's basically been radio silent for years, so people don't even fully believe that this is ever actually going to come out.
Right.
Um, but this game is going to be story driven as well, and it's going to be set in the High Republic era, which is a time period that they've explored a lot in books and more recently in the Acolyte TV show. This is sort of, it's not as far back as the Old Republic era, which is thousands and thousands of years before the movies. This is only a couple hundred years.
Mm-hmm.
This is towards the end of the era, so it's probably only a century, maybe 2 centuries tops before episode one. And from a story perspective, we have no idea. We have no idea what this is about. A lot of the imagery is just a lot of random things. It looks like a lot of crime syndicates. I'm only really inclined to believe it's towards the end of the time period because in the trailer we see Trade Federation battleships like the ones we see in episode one. So I'm
Right.
inclined to believe because of the similar technology we're in the tail end of the time period. And it looks like there's going to be a lot like we see Jedi in the trailers, we see lightsabers, we see a little bit of Coruscant, the Jedi Temple. Hell, we even catch a glimpse of Yoda in one frame. There looks
Okay.
like there's a lot of like crime syndicates and like again the Trade Federation and probably things like the Banking Clan and the Techno Union getting involved here.
And tell me
So
about your. Tell me about the last one.
technically, this is going to be two and one, but we're mostly going to talk about the main one I have here because there are two different older public related games in the works. We're going
Okay.
to quickly glance over the Knights of the Old Republic remake. It's like it says, it's a remake of the 2003 game Knights of the Old Republic, a fan
Mm-hmm.
favorite Star Wars game that was also announced in 2021, over 5 years ago. Shortly after it was announced, it was going to be developed by a studio called Aspire, but Aspire has never actually made a game before. They've done crappy ports of 20-year-old games to modern consoles,
Uh-huh.
and they sort of realized pretty early on that they have no idea what they're doing, so they shipped it over to Saber Interactive, which is a much more successful studio, and they basically restarted development from scratch. And yeah, last we heard, the game still exists. Beyond that, no clue. I mean, that takes place thousands of years before the movies, and we have no
Oh,
idea if it'll even be canon because the original game wasn't. But yeah, we're just gonna gloss over it because anyone who actually cares about that already knows what I'm talking about. And if you don't
yeah.
care about it, well, then that's probably because they announced the game 5 years ago and we've heard basically nothing since. But
All
the
right.
one that's more exciting is Fate of the Old Republic, which
Okay.
is a brand new game. And unlike the last two I mentioned, it was not announced at the Game Awards 2021 5 years ago. It was announced at the Game Awards 2025 3 months ago. So we know this is going to be a few years out. At the rate we're going, I'm not expecting this until 2028 or 2029.
Oh my God. Wow. It takes that long to make these games, huh?
That video game development makes movie development look like nothing by
Yeah,
comparison. Like they
jeez.
have to build everything from the ground up because not only do they have to build a story, they have to make it interactive. And
Right.
this is an RPG game, much like Knights of the Old Republic. This is sort of a spiritual successor to the Knights of the Old Republic games. And it actually has a lot of writers and developers from those games working
Mhm.
on this one. We don't know too much about its story. The cinematic trailer that they showed off at the Game Awards told us basically nothing about the story. We have no idea who the characters are. We have no idea how much, whether or not this is part of the new canon. We have no idea if it directly follows the Knights of the Old Republic storyline. Like what we've seen, hell, I didn't even figure out it was Star Wars until someone ignited the lightsaber at the end.
Mm.
Where like at the very end, I'm just like, is this Star Wars or is this just another space game? Because I was watching the
Yeah.
Game Awards when that trailer came out. And I'm like, I'm getting Star Wars vibes. And then I see like a one of the Sith warships from the Knights of the Old Republic, and I was like, I think that's a Star Wars thing. And then at the very end, you hear the lightsaber sound, and I'm like, I knew it. It's a Star Wars thing. And
All right. Well, it sounds like we got some good stuff coming out. So,
yeah, again, the first two I mentioned are the only ones I'm
yeah.
actually confident are coming out, but
Right.
we'll see.
I can't believe people don't put more out games more often, considering how popular Star Wars is.
They
But
did back in like the 2000s, when the
yeah.
prequel movies were coming out, they were doing two, three games every year. But
Well, that's
as
true. I
game
guess without
development,
any recent Star Wars movies, it's hard to do.
well,
But
with game development taking as long as it does these days, and I think the thing that held them back for the longest time is when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they signed an exclusivity deal with EA in 2013 that said that
yeah.
EA and only EA could make Star Wars games for
Yeah.
10 years.
Mhm.
And now that that deal expired in 2023, and now that it's expired, we're
Uh,
finally seeing more like major developers take start to tackle Star
yeah.
Wars projects. The first non-EA game we saw was Ubisoft's Star Wars Outlaws in 2024. I paid
Mm.
$110 to get that game 3 days early and have not touched it in a year, but and have not beaten it. Big mistake? Absolutely. Do I regret it? Absolutely. Would I do it again? Absolutely.
Yeah.
When it comes to Star Wars, my financial responsibility skills are worse than usual, which
Yeah.
is saying something because they're not very good to begin with. But
All right. Well, I think we're wrapped up with our topics today. So, for
yeah,
next week, we are going to talk about top five best actors of all time. So, you got your work cut out. That's a big long list, I would
yeah,
expect to figure out. So,
yeah, it's gonna
and you're going to see The Bride on Friday, right?
it's going. I have very, very high hopes. Early impressions are fantastic. The trailers look
Yeah.
wonderful. Shot for
Yeah.
IMAX, all that jazz. I'm seeing it in IMAX actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm excited to hear your review of that one. And then we're going to talk about, for Star Wars time, the top five best battle scenes,
Lightsaber
focusing
duel.
on lightsaber scenes, it seems. But
Labor. Okay.
we'll see what you come up with. So
Oh, I've written this list already. We're all cut out. I wrote this list like 2 years ago.
I figured you did. Yeah. All right, Nick. Well, thank you again. So I think that brings us to an end here. So
That does. So I'm going to put
so
my
let's
time
say
back.
goodbye and cut.
And yeah, cut.